Preparedness Essentials. There are a lot of people that believe that because they have 100 guns and 100,000 rounds of ammunition that they're prepared, or because they have a couple of generators that they're ready for an emergency. What we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is having some semblance of preparedness for a life-threatening emergency. Friends, if there are four things that are absolutely critical in such a situation, and we're going to talk about those four things. I don't care how many guns you have or generators you have. If you don't have these four things for at least a week, then you are not prepared. Remember, the goal is to prepare for an emergency so that you can be a blessing to others in the midst of the emergency. Let's get started. There are four things that are basic to survival in life and death situations. Without these things, on at least a longer term basis, more than a few hours or days, without these things, you will not survive. One basic thing is water. Another basic thing necessary to survival is food. The third basic in survival is shelter to protect you from the elements. And the last thing of these four is fire. Without these four things, in a life-threatening situation, you will not survive. Now, there are many, many other things that may be of help, such as guns or generators. But friends, without these four things, you will not make it. Now, the question is, which of these things is the most important? Well, it depends. Overall, water is the most critical. There's a saying that you can live 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So water, of these things, probably overall is the most critical. However, in extreme circumstances, shelter may be your top priority. For example, in the midst of a blizzard, for example. Survival situations, by their very nature, are physically stressful. So because of the physical stress of perhaps having to dig your neighbors out of the wreckage of their homes after a tornado, something like that, this may require the expenditure of a lot of physical energy and therefore a lot more food. So that's a very critical thing. Fire is important for a lot of reasons besides just cooking your food and keeping you warm. Fire is good for things such as lighting, sterilization of things. Fire is great for repelling wild animals or other kinds of creatures such as mosquitoes and so forth. Fire is great for attracting rescuers if you need them. You can use them to harden wooden spears or stakes if you need to drive them down in the ground. And there is nothing better than fire, hardly at all, for just plain raising your morale. You just feel better in the dark with a fire going. Now, since these items are so important, I recommend that you don't include just one of each. For example, don't include just one way of making a fire. Include more than one way of providing water and food and shelter and fire for yourself and your loved ones. For example, have a butane lighter, waterproof matches, and a magnesium fire starter. This is life and death you're talking about here, so have backups. Be sure to study and practice. If you've never made a fire under a stressful situation, you might want to practice. I recently we had a big storm while we were out camping, and all of our wood got wet. There was no way in that kind of a storm we were going to keep that wood dry, and thankfully I knew just a little bit about how to make a fire out of wet wood, and we got it going. It was a lot of work, and I used up all my butane and all my matches, so I ended up having to make that fire with my little sparker there. Now, there are layers of preparedness. For example, you will have a short-term bug-out bag. You'll have a portable container of some sort that will take care of your needs, your family's needs, for a week. All right, that's a short-term layer of preparedness. There's enough essentials for 7 days in there. It's portable, just in case you do have to evacuate and take it with you. It's something that you need to be able to have in your car. I recently heard of an emergency. Many families were out at work or different things, and they were unable to go home. They were partway home, and this thing happened. And if they didn't have something in their car, they were in serious trouble. There are also longer-term preparations that you can make. You can make preparations for enough of these things to last you for 2 weeks, a month, then build enough together to keep you going for 3 months. Many people have preparedness supplies for 6 months, 9 months, or a year. I am aiming toward that for myself and my family, to have enough food and other things, provisions for a year of survival. Water is a great place to start. There are several options when it comes to water for emergencies. You probably should just have some stored up, maybe in bags or bottles in your preparedness bag, in your bug-out bag. You can also disinfect water so you can have water to drink during the emergency. You can filter water and to get your water, and you can even produce water under certain circumstances. We'll talk about each of these in the next few minutes. Water storage is not bad. That one there with all the gallon jugs, I highly recommend against that one, though. Those jugs have a way of leaking. When we lived in Florida, I always kept, I think it was 20 gallons of water there, just in case of emergencies. And it was amazing how they would be sitting there happily week after week, and then I would come home from work one day and water was going everywhere. One of them had sprung a leak. I still don't know how they did it with nobody touching them, but they would do it. What you can use is 2-liter Coke bottles, for example. Do not use milk bottles. There's stuff left behind from the milk that can make different germs and bacteria in there grow. It's not safe. Don't do it. But Coke bottles, they don't leak, and they don't transmit the germs. So there's lots and lots of options for water storage. Now there's also lots and lots of options for filtering water. You see that one right there in the middle is the Berkey filter, a really nice thing. A lot of people keep them in their house just because they look nice, and I don't blame you. They are pretty. But for myself, because of emergencies, the one that I prefer is the Sawyer filter. This particular one right here is called the 181. This filter right here, you can use it. You can hook it up to your faucet in case there's a water main break or something like this going on, and you can filter the water coming into your house through your faucet. You can hook it up to a bucket and filter water, the rainwater, whatever, water off your roof that you get. Just for demonstrations, I've taken just scummy, the nastiest, ugliest pond water that you could ever ask for. I mean, it is green, and I run it through these Sawyer filters, and then I stand there and drink it. The first few times I did it, it did make my stomach turn somersaults. But the Sawyer filter is an amazing filter because essentially it will never wear out. When the production starts dropping off, that particular filter there will filter, I think it's about 300 gallons of water a day. That's a lot of water. You can keep your neighborhood going on that. But when it starts slowing down, what you do is take some of that filtered water. They give you a syringe, and you shoot it backwards, back through the filter. You just keep shooting that clean water back through it, and what'll come out the other end of it is the old nasty scum stuff. And you just keep doing it until it comes out clean, and you're ready to go again. That's all there is to it. You don't have to go out and buy a new filter. You're not scrubbing and all this other kind of stuff with steel wool. It's really a simple filter, and they're very reasonably priced. You can get them off of eBay for, I think it's less than $60. Highly recommend Sawyer filters. Now there's also the option of disinfecting water. You can take, say, some clear water out of a stream, let it sit for a while, and the stuff filter to the bottom, and then put in some bleach, some of these germicidal tablets, some iodine. The only problem with these things is they do, lose their potency over a period of time, and that's very bad if you go to drink some water that you think has been disinfected and it's not, and you get sick. Another way to disinfect water is with bleach. This is what I do. I keep bleach in my bug out bag just for that and for disinfecting other things. But friends, I cannot overemphasize to you the importance of drinking clean water. I know a lady and her son who rented a home out in the country, and they were not told that the water that was coming out of that well was not drinkable. And they drank this water, and they ended up with, I think it was 7 different conditions, and any four of those 7 could have killed them. They've had a terrible time since then. Friends, you don't need that in the midst of a life-threatening emergency. Make sure you drink good, clean water. The fourth thing is you can actually produce your own water. You can take clear bags or, say, black bags, put them over a limb, and water. See there, water will start appearing in that bag, and then you can drink that water. It's good, clean water. Another way to produce water is, come on, there he goes. Here's another way you can put the bag over the limb. Another way you can do it is to dig a hole, and down in the bottom of the hole, see how you can set a cup or a bucket or a plate or something like there down in there, and then you put a plastic sheet over it. The sun shines down through the sheet, and you know how it'll start collecting moisture. Well, the moisture will run down that, especially if you put a little rock or something like that in the middle of the plastic sheet, and the moisture will then start collecting in that cup or plate down there. A neat idea is if you can take a plastic hose and run it down into there, so you can just lay down on the ground and then drink the water that you've collected without having to take your distiller apart and go through all that work every time you want a mouthful of water. So there's several ways you can actually produce your own water. Food is our next topic. Now there's several considerations for food. You have to have food in your bug out bag, and you need at least 7 days of food for you and your family. You need the government says 3 days, but let's be honest, folks. Whenever there's a big enough disaster that you have to depend on the government for it, it's probably going to be 7 days. So plan on 7 days. I would rather plan on 7 days and then have food after 3 days coming from the government or something. But be sure you plan ahead. Plus, you may need food to give away. The food also needs to be portable, so look for the kind of packaging. You can't take 7 days worth of food for you and your family in cans, for example. There's no way you're going to carry all that. Be careful about spoilage. If you're carrying around your bug out bag in your car, the heat will break that food down pretty quickly. Even if it's guaranteed for 25 years, the heat will ruin it. Also, consider the weight. If this is supposed to be something portable, there's no way you're going to carry around 7 days worth of cans for yourself and your family. So weight is a serious consideration. And as we mentioned, you definitely want to have food to give away, because very few people are going to do what you've done. And when you, in an emergency, there's an old saying that in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. If you've done even a slight bit of preparation and just the slightest bit of thinking about emergencies, then friends, you're going to be way ahead of nearly everybody else. And so you're automatically going to be in a little bit of a leadership position in a disaster. So to have some food to give away. You can't support everybody in the neighborhood. You can't have enough food to feed 1,000 people, but you can help some people. The single mother with the children, whatever, you need to be able to help them. There's also longer-term food that needs to be thought about. Portability in longer-term situations is not as critical because it's just impossible. Another thing that you can do, my wife and I do, is we just build up a lot of the foods that we use daily, and we just rotate them. We always eat the older food, the older rice, the older cans, or whatever. And this drastically reduces the cost. If it's money you're going to be spending anyway, you just build up some ahead. Also, don't forget, babies and pets have special needs, and they are your responsibility. You need to take care of babies and pets. Also, don't ignore comfort food. In the middle of stress and tragedy, to have some candy and things like that can be a real blessing. Also, try to have food for your neighbors. For example, you can take Ziploc bags and fill them with dry beans and just put them back. Just have 10 or 15 or 20 pounds of little half-pound bags of dry beans. That's a lot of food for people. You can just give them a bag of beans and say, here you go, don't come back. That's kind of our plan. I hope it never happens. I pray to God that all this energy and food that we put back is completely wasted. There's lots of places you can buy emergency food that's portable, dried food. Walmart has all kinds of things, for example. That's one of the things we did, that sort of thing right there. We bought a big bucket of stuff, and I divvied it up among a couple of backpacks. Here's long-term stuff. Look right there, $2,200 for 1,080 packages of food. They say a serving, folks, usually these servings are for people that are very small and don't eat very much and that are not under a lot of stress. It'll probably each one of those servings will probably be half of a meal for you. Here's some more. Here's Costco. Like some of these options here, they come in really handy. My personal favorite is Thrive. Now, if you've never had Thrive food, it is, for all practical purposes, indistinguishable from fresh food. It's incredibly high quality. They even have butter and things like that you just add water to, and you cannot tell it from store-bought stuff. Shelter is our third topic. There's a lot of considerations in shelter. Clothing is your basic shelter. One friend of mine, he's been an outdoorsman, a mountain man. He's like 60 years old now. He's super experienced, and he says, look, I've got a coat, got my clothes on. He says something terrible happens, I just go out under a tree, and I'm set for the night. And I'm a city boy, and that is not mine. But never, ever, ever forget that clothing is your basic shelter. You need to have plenty of clothes in your bug-out bag. Also, don't forget that many disasters are weather-related, so you need to count on your clothes being damaged or soaked or whatever. You need to prepare for cold weather. Have plenty of things there to keep you warm. It's one thing. I was talking with a lady. She says, oh, yeah, I just run from the house out to the car, and the car's already been sitting there. It's warmed up and ready to go, and I get out of the car, and I run into the store, and she says, so clothing is not an issue. Well, friends, in case of a disaster, there may be no warm place to go. So you need to have the clothing available for that. So you also need to prepare for ways to keep cooler in hot weather. How are you going to keep out of the sun, for example, in the summertime if there's a disaster? One of the things that's I think is invaluable is these little Mylar blankets. You can buy them off of eBay for just a little bit. See that 10-pack there on the bottom? I bought, I don't know how many 10-packs of these things, and they're just divvied up in my cars. They're in my bug-out bag. They're in my little bag that I carry to the office. All these things. I just keep those blankets there. They really, really come in handy. There's lots and lots of places you can buy them. This is the actual real live space blanket here. It costs 2 or 3 times as much, but it also works better than the cheapies. You also want to have a way to support any kind of shelter. Paracord is wonderful for that. You can buy all kinds of lengths of it. I recommend at least 100 feet at a time, and black is good. Here is one neat shelter I saw it was on the Discovery Channel here. What these fellows did, you can see there on the left behind them, they took a Mylar sheet, and they took the paracord and so forth, and they put that down behind them, and they put another one of those Mylar sheets underneath them. Well, they put like pine needles and stuff, then they put the Mylar sheet on top of that to reflect their heat back in. And then they hung a clear plastic drop cloth, and outside of that they built a fire. Well, they took a thermometer, stuck it outside, and it was like, I forgot, like 30 degrees, 35 degrees outside. They brought that thermometer in, and in that simple shelter right there, it was 70 degrees. You can see them sitting there in short pants. Absolutely amazing, and I highly recommend preparing for this because it's incredibly cheap to have that kind of a shelter in your bug-out bag. Now, will it stand up in a storm? That's another thing. but that's an entirely different issue. The fourth thing to talk about is fire. Under ideal conditions, fire is very easy to do, but in a disaster, it may not be ideal conditions. Most disasters leave us with less than ideal conditions, so you want to have multiple ways of having fire. So sterno is an excellent way to have a fire, even if, say, all the wood around is wet, or there may not be any wood, who knows. But don't forget that to have a real fire does take wood. So you got to have a way to get that wood. How are you going to cut it? How are you going to, bring the, whatever. How are you going to get that wood? Be sure to prepare for that. One of the ways to do that is with a stainless steel wire saw. They're very cheap. You see right here is one for about $1. They're very lightweight. The trouble is they do wear out relatively quickly, so you might want to have more than one. But you can cut wood with them. It's not quite as easy as they make it look, though. You can actually buy little things right here that has the blanket, a fire starter, and the saw all in one for, what you see right there, about $5. You can get them for less than that. I bought I don't know how many of those and have them stuck in my car, just squirreled back in case of an emergency. I also keep a hatchet in my bag. I know it's heavy, I know it's bulky, but you can use a hatchet for so many things. Pounding steaks, cutting limbs, sharpening things, making a spear. You can use a hatchet as a weapon. There's many things you can do with a hatchet. I highly recommend getting a cheap one from Harbor Freight or wherever for just a few bucks. Also, a machete can have about the same function, except for pounding steaks and so forth, as a hatchet, but it can make a fearsome weapon. This one right here, you see it's got the serrated back of the blade so that you can supposedly cut limbs and so forth, small limbs off with that. So, we've talked about fire, but now you have to have something to put all of this stuff in. So you want to have some kind of a portable container. I personally highly recommend what is called an Alice bag, but all these four things must be in there. Now all these needs for water, food, shelter, and fire have to be met with redundancy. Friends, you can't just have one little water bottle, a little box of matches, some granola bars. Okay, that's not going to cut it. You have to have redundancy. And then there's many other things. You may, for example, need medicines that you want to include. I highly recommend you have a first aid kit. If there's a disaster, there's also a very high probability that somebody's going to be hurt. I highly recommend you might want to think about including a Bible. Reading material is really important, plus the spiritual support that can give you, the courage that you can get from a Bible in the midst of a tragedy. Survival knives. You want to have those. A knife is very important. Some way of communicating. A radio to receive the broadcast from the area is highly recommended. Walkie-talkies. I keep those in my backpacks. I keep fresh batteries in my backpacks. That's where I put fresh batteries, and then I take the last set of batteries and I bring them into my house to use in my flashlights and so forth there. You also want to, like we mentioned, have medicines and first aid kits. You definitely want to have money. Make sure when you put money in there, don't just put a stack of $100 bills. I mean, unless you want to buy a candy bar with a $100 bill and just not have any change. You need to have change, small bills, lots and lots of small bills. You might want to consider weapons. I keep ammunition for my weapons in my bug-out bags. It's really good, by the way, if you buy guns that are all the same caliber. I didn't think ahead and do that, and so now I have different calibers of ammunition I have to carry around in my bug-out bags. Signaling devices, mirrors, and different things like that. Tools, such as small shovels, camping shovels, that sort of thing. these multi-tools that has the pliers and all these different things in them. You definitely want to have paracord there. Have lights, flashlights, especially hands-free lights that clip on your hat, something like that. Those are very important to have. And of course, you want to have batteries to go with them. And there's much, much, much more. My bug-out bag weighs about 70 pounds. It's an Alice, a large Alice bag, which is a military bag, ALICE. They're relatively reasonably priced, but I tell people that I can start a small civilization with what I have in that Alice bag there. I plan, as a matter of fact, if there ever is an emergency, to leave a big chunk of that behind. Depends on what I need to do with it, is what I will take with me in it. You can buy them already made up. Here's one right here for $300 that you can buy. It's a pretty neat bag. Nothing wrong with that at all. I kind of just made mine personally. But you see that little survival book right there. Might as well get it. You can buy those offline. I bought mine, 25 years ago, I'll bet. Or maybe 30 years ago I bought a copy of that. Before there was an internet. It doesn't have to be an Alice bag. You can use a container like this, but it needs to be something that's relatively easy to move. I have handy trucks, things like this, that I can use to carry my Alice bags on because they are just frankly too heavy to carry. Like I said, I have lists packed in my bags of things that I want to carry. Say if I need to just evacuate to a hotel or a neighbor's house, if I compared to maybe going to a shelter or going into the woods, just to live out in the woods, if that comes to it. I am trying to be prepared and know what to take. So, in closing, let's sum it up. You need to provide for at least 7 days of the 4 basic essentials for your family in redundancy: water, food, fire, and shelter. You need to have a carryable container that you can use to transport these essentials. You want to begin building up a bunch of non-portable provisions for longer periods, a month, 3 months, or even longer. And remember, you want to carry this stuff in your car to have enough for at least a week in your car in case something happens when you're away from home. If you're at home when this happens, then it's already protected in your car. Our goal is to avoid being part of the problem and instead be a blessing to the neighbors around us. We want to not be the one in the line. We want to be the one that's serving the line of people needing help. Pray that, and most of all, folks, pray that all of the time and the effort and the thought and the study and the money that went into getting prepared is completely wasted. Seriously. Don't forget, the most important thing that goes into preparedness is being spiritually prepared. Friends, you can survive 100 tornadoes, terrorist attacks, chemical spills, but sooner or later you will die. If you're not ready for that ultimate disaster called death, then friends, all this other preparedness is completely worthless. So get to know the God of the Bible and His Son. We call Him Jesus in America. The Hebrews called Him Yeshua. Get to know Him. He will be there for you in the midst of crisis. He never promises you that you won't have to go through times of trial. Look at Him. He Himself set the example for that. He went through trials that the rest of us could never even dream of going through. He went through them, and so He knows what tragedy and disaster is all about. He lived in an oppressive society, so He knows the things that go into living through disaster and trials. So get to know this God of the Bible, and look at some of our other videos, and we'll talk more about that in those videos. But make sure that you live a life of being prepared physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And may God bless you as you prepare. Amen.